All right, so now we're going to talk about something that kind of brings it all together, and it's one of my favorite topics. Now, I told you I'm not here to do process improvement, but that doesn't mean I'm against process. And in fact, if you're ever tasked to run a department or an organization, I think managing by process is the best way to do it. It is what I do, again, when I do mentorship and coaching. If I've got a VP and he's going to take over, accounts payables, I basically say, hey, run that thing by process. So what is process management? Basically, supply chain is actually the United States. I'm sure somebody was doing it before, but it was like in my experience, one of the first kind of movements to process management. So let's use that as an example. Even today, unfortunately, people manage by function. They manage by functional silos, okay? So for example, I'll use the classic example, manufacturing, then I got to put stuff in the warehouse, then I got to transport it to the customer, and of course sales has to sell it, right? All right, now on that note, HR shouldn't be a core function in your industry. IT should not be a core function in your industry. If those two have managed to creep up and become fiefdoms in your company, you've got problems, in my opinion. HR and IT are both enabling processes. IT should simply be providing the technology to the major functions to do their job, and HR should be providing the talent to these functions to do their job. But unfortunately, in many companies, they end up becoming one of these. So where did supply chain come from? Well, these folks all had their own why metric. All right, so let's use the soup example. Sales will sell 1 can of tomato soup if they can get away with it because they're driven on sales dollars, right? But manufacturing is driven on cost, and they are going to run tomato soup until the world runs out of tomatoes. The last thing they want to do is clean the machines to switch over to make that can of cream of mushroom. So if I'm making as much tomato as I can, I'm forcing this guy, who is also measured on cost, to hold these full pallets of tomato soup. He wants to get them out of the warehouse because this guy's measured by cost, but he's going to say, nuh-uh, I'm not going to deliver unless you give me a full truck, full pallet. So basically what happened is they all worked against each other. And I remember coming up in the 80s and early 90s, every company had this massive warehouse. I can usually tell by the size of the warehouse who has the most power in an organization. If you have a huge warehouse full of stuff, manufacturing rules the roost. If sales rules the roost, you'll see a lot of changeovers, constant schedule changes in manufacturing, sort of driving them crazy. If warehousing has power, you'll see less than truckload shipments. But somebody just realized, hey, we're doing it wrong. Let's manage this way. Put your why here, cost per can. That's how we should be measuring the organization. And then guess what, folks? Your Y's are now X's. And almost overnight, this is what you saw. The warehouses went away. You just don't see a lot of warehouses today in big companies. If you do, stuff's moving out quickly. Now what happened is manufacturing costs went up, but it was more than compensated with the reduction in warehouse costs. All right, transportation today does ship smaller, right? Sales can sell smaller quantities, which more than offset some of that stuff. So supply chain was really a step into managing by process. You manage this way. How do we make, pack, ship, and sell a can of soup, and realize that all these folks are knobs turning, but that is the way that we're supposed to run the metric. Now, unfortunately today, on a side note, now poor supply chain, I have some companies where supply chain has to schedule training classes and hire the vendor, and it's getting a little out of hand, but that was its original concept. So now that you kind of have a good understanding of managing by process, I'm going to give you some other examples and talk about how to staff this.